Welcome, embodied ones. Welcome, remembering ones. Before we begin, I want to name clearly the following is not content. It is a divine transmission, an offering for those who are beginning to understand that consciousness is not only what we believe. It is what we repeatedly feed, what we repeatedly allow, what we repeatedly consume, what we repeatedly give our presence to. Because the field is always listening, not only to our words, not only to our intentions, not only to the version of ourselves we present publicly. The field reads the practiced self, the repeated self, the private self, the self we become through what we continue to choose. And this is why consciousness stewardship matters. Not from shame, not from fear, not from spiritual perfectionism, but from reverence. Because your attention is holy. Your body is holy. Your private field is holy. And what you give your life force to does not remain separate from the reality you enter. So may this transmission meet only those it is meant to meet. May it land as remembrance, not condemnation, as clarity, not pressure, as an invitation back into presence, into truth and sacred allowance, because the field cannot be catfished. And now we begin. At any given moment, we are emitting frequency, not only through what we say, not only through what we post, not only through what we claim to believe, but through what we allow, what we consume, what we ingest, what we watch, what we entertain, what we tolerate, what we return to in private, what we participate in for acceptance, what we call harmless because no one else can see it. All of it speaks. All of it announces to the field. This is what I allow. This is what I regard. This is what I am available for. This is what may enter my atmosphere. And the field responds, not to the version of us we perform publicly, but to the frequency we are actually cultivating, because the field cannot be catfished. You can rebuke something with your mouth while still feeding it with your attention. You can say you desire peace while privately consuming chaos. You can say you are calling in love while repeatedly giving your field to lust, comparison, envy, resentment, fear, fantasy, or distortion. You can say you want blessings while continuing to make yourself available to the frequencies that repel them. And this is not punishment. It is resonance. The field brings us into contact with what we have been feeding. It reflects what we have permitted to take root. It shows us the architecture we have been building with our attention. Because attention is not passive. Attention is agreement at the level of energy. What we watch enters. What we repeat enters. What we desire enters. What we secretly rehearse enters. What we keep returning to becomes familiar to the field. Even if we reject it later, the contact has already occurred. This is why vigilance matters. Not fear-based vigilance, not religious paranoia, not perfectionism, but loving, conscious stewardship, the kind of presence that asks, does this bring me closer to the divine or farther from myself? Does this strengthen my coherence or fragment my field? Does this feed love, peace, clarity, reverence, and truth? Or does it feed fear, craving, division, comparison, numbness, and unconsciousness? Because we are always inviting. We are always broadcasting. We are always training the field in how to meet us. And to remain conscious is not a superpower. It is the byproduct of presence. It is what happens when the being returns to the moment and stops abandoning themselves through unconscious intake. Presence is the gatekeeper. Presence notices before the pattern takes over. Presence can feel when something is not clean. Presence can sense when the body tightens, when the heart dulls, when the field becomes noisy, when the spirit begins to dim. And presence gives us the power to choose again. Not from shame, from sovereignty, not from fear, from love. Because what we feed becomes familiar. What becomes familiar becomes normalized. What becomes normalized becomes a pathway. And what becomes a pathway becomes a reality we keep entering, wondering why the field keeps bringing us the same lesson. The field is not confused. The field is precise. It reads the private altar. It reads the hidden appetite. It reads the repeated agreement. It responds to the signal beneath the statement. It reads what the mouth denies, but the attention continues to worship. So this is a call back to conscious allowance, a call back to sacred intake, a call back to remembering that your field is holy. Your body is holy. Your attention is holy. Your private life is holy. Your consumption is not separate from your manifestation. Your presence is not separate from your protection. Your coherence is not separate from what you allow yourself to repeatedly touch. Choose what blesses the field. Choose what strengthens the soul. Choose what lets love become easier to hold. Choose what makes peace more available. Choose what keeps your inner temple clear enough to recognize what is actually meant for you. Because the field cannot be catfished. And the moment you become honest with what you are feeding, you begin to reclaim what you are inviting. Ashe, Amen, Selah. Let light bear witness. This transmission follows the law of divine imprint as the next layer. On frequency, attention, private consumption, and conscious allowance. Because the field does not only read what we say we are, it reads what we feed, it reads what we allow, It reads what we repeatedly give attention to. It reads what we entertain when no one is watching. It reads what we keep choosing beneath the words we speak. The field itself cannot be catfished. And this will not resonate with all. Not because it is harsh, but because not every being is ready to see where they truly are on the path. Some are still identifying with the image of who they wish to be. Some are still defending the habits that fragment them. Some are still calling indulgence freedom, distraction rest, and unconscious consumption harmless. But the field is precise. It does not respond only to the performed self. It responds to the practiced self, the private self, the repeated self, the nourished self, the self we are actually becoming through what we continue to feed. So, let this land only where it is meant to land, not as shame, not as fear, not as spiritual perfectionism, but as an invitation back into conscious stewardship. Because what we feed becomes familiar. What becomes familiar becomes a pathway. And what becomes a pathway becomes the reality we keep entering. For those of you who made it to the end of this transmission, you are not here by accident. Something in your field recognizes this current. Something in you stayed because this was not only information. It was recognition. It was remembrance. It was a mirror for what your own consciousness may already be sensing. This transmission is being released into the collective field at this time, because many are beginning to understand that awakening is not only about what we believe. It is about what we repeatedly allow, what we consume, what we normalize, what we give our life force to, what we call harmless while it quietly shapes the field we live inside. The divine is asking this to be named now, because more beings are being called out of unconscious intake and back into sacred stewardship, back into discernment, back into presence, back into honesty with a private altar, because the next level of embodiment requires congruence. The public self and the private self can no longer remain divided. The words and the habits can no longer remain split. The prayer and the pattern can no longer keep contradicting each other without consequence in the field. So, if Spirit nudged you while listening, honor the nudge. Subscribe if you feel called to return to this field. Share this with someone whose spirit may recognize it. Leave a reflection of something in you opened, softened, or remembered. Not for performance, for resonance, for the ones quietly finding their way back into coherence, for the ones who know there is more than the world has taught us to consume, for the ones ready to become honest with what they are feeding, so they can become sovereign in what they are creating. May this transmission continue working gently in the field. May what is meant to remain, remain. May what is not yours pass in peace. May your attention return to holiness. May your private life become an altar of coherence. And may your presence become clean enough to recognize what is truly meant for you. Ashe, Amen, Selah. Let light bear witness.